Blog Talk Radio.
The purple angel, oh purple angel, you're next to me. Purple angel, oh purple angel, you're next to me. You're next to me. You're next to me.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm the founder of Alzheimer's Speaks and your host today, and I'm thrilled to be here. We're going to have a great show. We have two different topics we're going to be talking about. One is personalized puzzles to engage those with dementia. And we're going to be speaking to some people who have dealt with dementia, who have used the puzzles, who have created this concept, which is really cool. And then the second half of the show, we're going to be talking with the Alzheimer's team, one of their doctors there, about some clinical trials, which is always great information to hear. So hopefully you can stay with us the whole 2 hours. If by chance you can't, don't worry. It is a podcast, and you can always go back and listen to it later. And please don't forget to share it with others. For those of you that are new to the show, Alzheimer's Speaks is an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort around the world. We're all about connecting the dots and getting people a little bit more at ease with this disease. We believe that by joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having everyday conversations about life with dementia, that we can actually remove the stigmas attached to memory loss and help those living and dealing with this disease continue to live purpose-filled lives. Together, we can help everybody understand the true needs and kind of tricks of the trade when dealing with dementia. At our core, Alzheimer's Speaks believes that collaboratively we are going to win this battle. And I know that we are having a huge impact because we were honored to be named the #1 influencer online for Alzheimer's, according to ShareCare, which is the largest health and wellness site in the world, and Dr. Oz. And I have to tell you, that would not have happened without our listeners. You guys have been absolutely fabulous in terms of sharing the information that we give you. You share it with, your troops and your tribes all around the world, from those that are dealing with Twitter. You might be throwing it out to your tribes that way. Others might be shooting it out to their Facebook friends. Others might be sending it over to their colleagues on LinkedIn and all the other different social media platforms there are. It makes absolutely no difference where you share it. But the power of the impact, please don't ever underestimate that. There are so many people touched by this disease. In fact, every 4 seconds, somebody in the world is diagnosed with dementia. And if you look at your own circle of friends, you would be shocked, because this is a disease we still don't talk about. And so the more information we can get out to people, the more comfortable they're going to feel grabbing it when they need it. Now, another thing that I want you to know about Alzheimer's Speaks Radio is that we want to raise everyone's voice. So if you're a person with dementia, if you're a family caregiver or a friend, if you have a business that is really making a difference in the lives of those dealing with dementia, maybe you're a researcher, maybe you are an advocate. We have film directors, musicians, authors. Everyone is welcome because, again, we believe that the power of one can affect many. And so if we all use our unique skills and talents and we're willing to share them, it just makes it so much easier on everyone. Now, you can participate also in the show a couple of ways. One, you can use our chat box and I'll be checking that throughout the show. And you can throw out a question or a comment, or you can call in live, and that number is 714-364-4757. Again, that's 714-364-4757. Now, before I introduce our first guest, I always like to do shout out to a few different organizations. One is the Purple Angel Project. Very excited. They got their funding to do their documentary shoot over here in the U.S. So they're going to be coming here sometime in the fall, which is really very fun. They've done their shoot over in the U.K. already, and this is the new global symbol for dementia, which was started by Norms McNamara and Jane Moore. And, it's in over 17 countries. It costs nothing. And if you're interested in utilizing this symbol and, raising awareness, please go to AlzheimersSpeaks.com and then just go to our About page. You'll see the tab for the Purple Angel. All you have to do is click on, get me the kit, and I will shoot you over some information there. Many people around the world listen to our show, and so I like to remind people that the Alzheimer's Disease International is the organization of all Alzheimer's associations around the world. So there, not only can you get connected to what association is closest to you, but you're also going to get global data and research. It's absolutely fascinating what people are doing in other countries. They have a wonderful newsletter that they send out, and I would highly recommend signing up for that. Here locally in Minnesota, I work a lot with HealthStar Home Health, and I'm so excited to be working with them. Our state fair is coming up again this year. Once again, HealthStar Home Health is going to be doing memory screenings at our state fair. Last year was the first year it had ever been done, and they just touched so many people and made such a huge, huge impact. We're also going to be announcing the launch of something pretty special, which I can't say yet, but you'll be hearing about it, and stay tuned because it's exciting stuff. Let's see. The second half of the show, we are going to be talking with a doctor who works with the Alzheimer's team, which is advancing research, and she's going to be talking about what exactly their clinical trials are about and how you can enroll, so you'll definitely want to stay tuned to that. I also want to give a shout out to the Dementia Action Alliance Group, fairly new organization nationally here. We just completed our survey, and we had two different surveys, one for people with dementia, another one for care partners. We had a great response. So again, I want to thank everyone for participating in that. Now it's our job as our committee to go back and figure out what we're going to do with all that data. And so, look forward to that information because we will be getting that out to you. I also want to just remind people, if you are looking for a holistic route to approach this disease, a great organization to contact is the Alzheimer's Research and Prevention Foundation. They just do an amazing job. There you'll find out about exercise, diet, and meditation. They have some free educational programs as well. And then there are certain types of dementia that, all of them actually have their own symptoms, but a couple that really stand out is the Lewy body, the frontal temporal lobe, and then people having problems with speech. And so there is a Lewy body dementia association, and there's also one for FTD called the Association for Frontal Temporal Degeneration, and then the National Aphasia Association, which deals with speech and has some great information for you there. And aphasia is spelled A-P-H-A-S-I-A. That's A-P-H-A-S-I-A. So with no further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our guests here today. Very excited to have this group of women with us. I was approached on this whole puzzle concept, which I just think is fascinating. Personalized puzzles. Hey, how cool is that? I don't care if you have dementia or not, but if it's capturing a birthday shot or a wedding shot or helping somebody reminisce over their past. Just a really, really a neat idea. So today we have Mindy Dahlgren with us, and she spent her professional career as a in higher education, both in private schools like Vanderbilt, Mercy, and Duke, and public schools like Purdue University. She's published over 50 articles in the area of student life and transition from high school to college. And she has also taught at the elementary level and spent 12 years as an ice skating instructor while at Vanderbilt. Mindy, along with her twin sister, Missy, who is also on the show with us, worked at their family farm, which was an orchard and a resort out in Montana when she was younger. So welcome, Mindy. How are you today?
Just fine, thanks. How are you? I'm pleased to be here.
Well, good. I'm going to go ahead and pull your sister in here next. Melissa Dahlgren has spent 32 years in human resource leadership roles in the private sector, primarily in the consumer products industry, and Missy serves as a member of the Education and Scholarship 3 Committee at the Galena Territory Foundation. Missy and Mindy have both established the Mop Shop in August of 2014, which provides cleaning products to people as well. So welcome, Missy. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much.
Good. I'm going to move on here and keep going with our introductions here. Now, these two gals, Mindy and Missy, established what they call Pieces of the Past in collaboration with Portrait Puzzles in May of 2014. And it's their intent to really spread the word about the power of puzzles as a reminiscence activity for people with dementia. And I can't wait to get into this conversation. We also have with us Laura Neeson, who is a strong advocate for family caregivers and families affected by memory disorders. She is passionate about offering an opening and accepting environment in which to share different types of experiences. Laura has provided educational opportunities to learn about research findings, coping strategies, and ways to create a better life experience for everyone touched by dementia. She also currently volunteers at the Alzheimer's Association in honor of her mother-in-law, Marie, and her grandmother, Betty. So welcome today, Laura. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, good. We're thrilled you could make it. We've got one more guest here I'm going to introduce regarding the Pieces of the Past, and that is Linda Mordens. And her career and volunteer work went hand in hand over the years. Her passion began with her first job working in a nursing home in Michigan during her senior year of high school. And then she was a stay-at-home mom and served and earned her certificate of Braille transcriber for the Library of Congress in '73. She volunteers in school settings and meets the needs of the vision-impaired population, and has just done some really cool things in her life regarding Braille. And she also joined a caregiver support group and took over the leadership role as a facilitator of that group back in 2004. And that group meets the fourth Thursday of every month she's at the Midwest Medical Center. So welcome, Linda. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Well, that's good.
It's really a pleasure to be on your program.
Well, we're excited to have you. I do want to mention, too, that Jay McNamara, the owner of Portrait Puzzles, was unable to make it with us today because that's who these ladies, Mindy and Missy, are working with in terms of their Pieces of the Past. So let's start, and I'm going to throw this one out to you, Mindy, first. If you can give us a background, because it's always nice to know how people kind of got involved in advocacy for dementia. Can you tell me on behalf of you and your sister, were you guys touched in your own family? And just give us a brief little background there.
Sure. Yes, we've both been touched. We live in a small town in northwest Illinois, and our parents live 2,000 miles away in the Seattle area. Dad, who celebrated his 91st birthday last April, was diagnosed with Lewy body disease in 2001. He was 76 years old at the time, and although he became increasingly confused and frail, he's always been the kind and soft-spoken, gentle man we knew as Dad. Behavioral changes occurred gradually. He was always outgoing and talkative, and responses became single-syllable words. Rarely did he initiate conversation, and quite honestly, he would sleep more and eat less. Having always taken pride in his personal appearance, he was less inclined to shower and shave, brush his teeth, or comb his hair. There was also a period of time when Dad wandered, and being 2,000 miles away, we didn't know about these occurrences until he was safely back home, but they were certainly frightening experiences that our mother and our brother, who incidentally lives quite close to Mom and Dad, dealt with for several years. Mom served as his primary caregiver for 14 years, but as she aged, it became increasingly clear that she needed some assistance taking care of Dad and managing the house. And we struggled a bit with her to acknowledge that she needed some help, and ultimately she did agree to have some caregivers come in, and that helped tremendously. But as time passed, Dad needed help waking up in the morning, getting into and out of bed, eating, showering, and walking. Some days he would sleep 20 hours or more, and he was increasingly confused about where he was. Mom's challenge really became getting nourishment and medication to him in a timely manner. So in late January, he transitioned to an adult family home. It was a difficult decision, as you might guess, for Mom, and she agonized over it for many months. But it was a decision that we supported, and particularly as we grew increasingly concerned about her own health. She was always in duty and constantly in guard. When she slept, she did so fitfully, with one eye open and one ear always open. But plans for the transition were made with great care. We made decisions about the possessions that Dad would take, and our brother had his new room set up before Dad arrived. We included family photos. He had restored a Model A that he loved, and so a picture of his Model A went with him. His blanket and pillow, a chair from home, a pictorial chronology of his life that we'd presented to him one Christmas, a card table, and, of course, the puzzles that I know we'll have a chance to talk about later. The transition has been as good, I think, as it could have been. Dad's room is lovely. He's safe. The caregivers are kind, thoughtful, welcoming, and a member of the family has visited, or in our case, talked with him throughout each week. So we're continuing to take things one step at a time, always thankful for Dad's good days, and quite honestly, forever grateful for the many treasured memories we have of our much-loved parents.
Okay, great. Mindy, anything you want to add to that? Or Missy, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think, that's really a great recap. We, we feel particularly blessed that Dad does still seem to know us when we call, and he really has remained the kind, polite, and gentle man that we have always known and loved. So, we do feel very, very blessed, and the adult family home is very, very nice, and the folks love him and take very good care of him. And again, our mom and brother are able to visit several times a week, and we call a couple times a week and send care packages or cards with pictures of us and our home here on a weekly basis. So again, it's about as good as it can be, I think.
Okay, great. Laura, would you mind giving people a little background if you've been touched by dementia in your family?
Well, of course. When I was a very young professional, I experienced, or my first experience, I should say, was watching my parents very lovingly and compassionately caring for my grandmother who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So I was a little once removed from the process, but I was exposed to it and really saw probably, some of the finest moments. I don't know that at that time I had just completed college. If I knew entirely how stressful and maybe anxiety-producing it was for my parents, but I was exposed to it for the first time with my grandmother. Little did I know at that time that my parents were actually modeling the way for myself and my husband and really providing a roadmap for us years later when my mother-in-law, my husband's mom, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and we became very quickly the primary caregivers of her as she went through this experience with Alzheimer's for about 12 years. So we got up and close to it, and although there were years where it was confusing and a little anxiety-producing, we learned to grow into it. And the most significant thing that we look back at, now that she is deceased, is it was a very joyful time. We were calm and collected and tried to bring as many resources to her disease as possible, and then we just loved her and showed as much compassion as we possibly could. So as we look back, I decided that I want to help others go through this process because it can be a very joyful time, and although there are times where you can't believe it's happening, it all works out, and it's all good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Linda, how about you? Have you been personally touched by dementia?
Yes. My family embarked on a journey of the unknown when my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in June of 2002. She was at that time living in Michigan by herself, and we coaxed and pleaded with her, please move to Galena, Illinois with us, and she did. She then, at that point, we were very fortunate because the Galena South Senior Care Community in Galena had assisted living available, and it didn't matter at that time what the diagnosis was. As Mom progressed in the disease, she then moved into their nursing home. During that time, she spent a lot of time doing different activities in the adult daycare, and I was over there every day and volunteered in all three of the different programs. My mother actually did pass away in January in 2009, and she actually went through the 7 stages of Alzheimer's disease. I think the biggest thing for my family was making the choice of how we were going to handle my mother's diagnosis, and we decided that it was going to be positive. And the one thing that I've always said is that my mother had Alzheimer's disease. However, I was not going to let Alzheimer's rob me of my mother. So we met the challenges of the 7 stages. I agree with Laura. We did this with joy and by living in my mother's moment. I think probably the most significant thing for me was the caregiver support group in Galena. I joined that the minute I knew my mother had been diagnosed, and our group is still active, and it has been absolutely, I think, the most helpful, meaningful thing that happened along the line for my family, for myself, and for all the other people in the community facing this.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you. I also want to just give a little shout-out here and pull Harry Urban in. He is with us, and Harry is actually diagnosed with dementia. So how are you doing today, Harry? I see you're on the line and were able to join us, so thank you.
I'm doing fine, Lori. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, good. Well, we will pull you in again a little later, but I just wanted to let people know you're there. So here he is, just a wonderful, wonderful man doing some great work in terms of raising awareness. And so he always has some great insight for us as well. You each kind of talked a little bit about what it was like in terms of dealing with your family, but I would imagine that there's probably some things that we can add. And so, Missy, I'm going to go ahead and pull you in for this one, and maybe if you can talk for you and Mindy, on what it was like, the whole family impact, and what kind of coping mechanisms did you use in terms of dealing with dementia with your father?
Well, I think we are fortunate in that we have a very close family, and although Mindy and I are obviously far away from Mom and our brother, we talk often, and there were times when we did make trips home to be supportive of just going through the entire process and making some of the decisions that had to be made. It was certainly very tough, but we talked a lot. We supported one another a great deal, and we were always most concerned about both Mom and Dad, frankly, feeling as though they would both be safe and taken care of, no matter what. With us, it has always been, whether a job or anything else, families first, and that's pretty much been the way that we have, looked at this journey. We have been very supportive. Again, we talk a lot. We help Mom with some of the frustrations simply by being there and being supportive of her. Go through some of her own concerns and issues and frustrations and disappointments and so on and so forth. It's very, very tough on the caregiver, as folks out there know. In many respects, Dad got, certainly a great deal of attention, and yet there's a lot of attention that is due and needed by the caregiver too, in terms of support. So we tried to balance those in a way that made sense, again, from afar.
Okay, great. And Mindy, anything that you want to add to that?
No, I don't think so. Missy just hit the nail on the head. We are very, very fortunate in that our family is close and has always been close. So emails fly back and forth on a daily basis. There are probably times when Mom thinks, God, this is the third one today. I've just about had it, girls. But she knows we're there to be supportive, and that we care deeply for both Mom and Dad. And we, as Missy said, we try to do the best we can from 2,000 miles.
Okay, wonderful, great. And, Linda, how about you in your family? How did you guys cope? Was everybody on the same page? I know sometimes that can be a struggle at times.
Well, I would say that we were on the same page at the beginning. We definitely all agreed. I have a brother who is married, so there were just the two of us. And he fully agreed that, yes, the best decision was for Mom to come to Galena. However, as time went on, it was more and more difficult to talk to my brother about things because he didn't agree with some of the decisions that we had to make. And the hardest point, and I know there are so many people going through this, long distance is really difficult to try and coordinate ideas and agreements. As much as we tried to decide major decisions together, he began to pull away, and it ended up that my brother did not see my mother for the last 3 years of her life, which to me was absolutely tragic. His reason for that, and I hope this will help somebody else, his reasoning was it was too hard for him to see her go through this disease. But the most important thing, I think, that a person with dementia, Alzheimer's needs, they still need the love, they still need the touching, they still need you. And so my story is a little bit different because of the fact that my brother was not on the same page with me. He wasn't on the same page with the doctors. He wasn't on the same page with the care that she was getting. So that presented a lot of different problems, and I've realized through my caregivers group over the years that this is a very, very common thing that happens between siblings. And so I'm just hoping that, others won't have to go through the crisis that I did with my brother.
Yeah, it is tough, and it's very common, very, very common, and very, very sad. I have two brothers myself, and one ended up moving out of town. My mom had the disease for 30 years though, so it started. Yeah, so she started at my age in her mid 50s, and then lived to 86, and it was just so painful for them to be around, and so they chose not to, which is their choice. But it made me just feel so sad because I just felt like they lost out on so much. But everybody has to live their own journey with this, and and maybe their pulling away made my relationship even more special to me because I could see what they lost even clearer. I don't know, it all makes me wonder, because it's so fascinating. And I know that there's definitely some regrets and things. And again, there's only so much you can do to help people through their own journey. And it's just a very, very interesting process. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Linda, very much. I'm going to go ahead and pull Laura in, and if I can get to her here. And Laura, how about you and your family in terms of coping and caring and the compassionate road? How did you guys do?
Sure. Well, like Missy, Mindy, and Linda, communication was very important. So just communication, with the physicians and with the caregivers and with our families, specifically our siblings. So we had a lot of the same challenges that you all spoke of. We also, tried to be very compassionate and patient. But I think we've alluded to, that courage piece, and that's really, really important. Once we kind of grew into this after we realized what was occurring, maybe like year 2 or year 3, we just became, I think, very, courageous for one, and creative in our approach to it. So this was something we didn't really know much about, but we found that the less tight we held on, the looser we were, and the more creative and courageous we were, the better it went. So our kind of premise was we were going to meet Marie wherever she was that day, and we were going to, I think Linda talked about it earlier, we were going to meet her in her moment. So surprisingly, and this was really special for me to see my husband do this, we did a lot of improv. I didn't know that it was improv at the time, but we would listen with our heart and our minds to whatever she would say, and then whether it was logical or not, we would go with it. And so I think that's where, as we look back, that creative, approach to just being open and, creative with the whole process really let us grow into that experience.
I love that, courageous and creative. And just it to me, with my mom, it taught me to play again. And I don't know if you felt like that, but it was lighter, it was easier, it was fun, it was brilliant. It wasn't this doom and gloom that everybody puts on it.
Absolutely.
Because you weren't trying to put it in a box anymore. So
and then as it relates to our siblings and all the grandchildren, at times I thought maybe they thought we were too lighthearted about it. But, we tried to coach them and give them guidance on, what kinds of activities they could do with Mom. And some, met that suggestion really well and kind of got into the joy piece with us, and some were not as, they weren't as comfortable with it, and I wish they could have just been a little bit more, because I think they would, as you guys have already talked about, I think they would have experienced that joy with us.
Yep, exactly. Well, thank you for sharing. We do have a caller on the line, so I'm going to go ahead and pull them in. We've got somebody from a 951 number. You're live and on the air. Do you want to state your name and if you have a question or a comment for us?
Yeah, this is Rich. How are you this morning, Lori?
Good. How are you doing, Rich?
Good. Enjoying your conversation. I really enjoyed the Parade Magazine's article back on June 21st regarding Alzheimer's. It was nice to see it out there in the public, and I do believe your name got dropped in the article too, Miss LeBay.
Yeah, for Memory Cafe. So that was pretty cool. That has a huge reach. I think it's like 18 million or something like that. It's just kind of a massive reach. So we got a wonderful response off that.
I think that's great, and from my perspective, that was actually published one day before the 1-year anniversary of my wife, who passed away at 59 from Alzheimer's. So through the process of the grieving and stuff, it just to let you know, it's so important to me to see that it's out there and that we start the conversation. And perhaps just getting the conversation out there will get more family involvement. And in my case, the family just was in denial, and as I was listening before, it's too sad for them, and there's really, without the publicity like that and the understanding of this disease, which I'm hoping we will get more of, it's probably going to persist until we get it out there in the public, what it's like to be a caregiver. And for me personally, it meant the world to me when someone would call the house and see my wife smile and laugh. And when you're in that box, as you say, just those moments charges up the caregiver. That's what I want to say, is that getting the battery recharged for a caregiver could be something as a simple 5-minute call from a family member.
Great. Well, thanks for calling in, Rich. Appreciate your input.
I
Have
appreciate
a great day.
What you do, Ms. LeBay.
Thank you. Well, that was Rich Garner, and I appreciate his call in. Why don't we go ahead and move on? One of the things that we don't typically do well, especially here in the States, is taking care of ourselves. So, Mindy, I'm going to throw this one to you. How did you care for yourself as a caregiver? And how did your mom and your other family members do?
Well, that's tough, because I think you, or at least certainly Mom, has put Dad and his needs in front of her own, which I think is what most people would tend to do under the circumstances. So that's a very tough question. We tried to encourage her to continue doing some of the things that she enjoyed, whether it was meeting friends for lunch or continuing with her aerobics classes, her swimming classes, aerobics classes in the pool. But quite honestly, that fell to the wayside pretty quickly. She got concerned about leaving the house. Even when Dad had a caregiver there, she was a bit concerned about leaving. So we struggled with that, and it's a toughie. It's a toughie. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's always enjoyed reading. She still does read. I think that's probably one thing that allows her to escape from the daily stressors. But in terms of getting out and exercising and seeing friends and even shopping, it was a tough situation.
Okay. Yeah, it's never easy. That's for sure. Missy, how about you? Anything that you want to add? In terms of how you or you saw your family care for themselves as caregivers?
Well, I think one thing that we do know that Mom was able to do, she is very much a people person, and so at several of Dad's doctor's appointments, she did meet folks who were going through similar experiences, similar journeys, and she has maintained contact with those folks. And that's, I think, been very helpful to everyone involved. I mean, she could actually talk to somebody who was going through the same thing, who had the same struggles, who had the same frustrations, and that was huge for her. And those relationships are very special and, again, very helpful. Because many of the caregiver programs in the Seattle area tend to be in the evenings after the caregiver would leave, she didn't really have an opportunity to engage in those as much as we would have wished or she would have wished. But there were certainly social workers that she met with and folks from the doctor's office that did prove to be very helpful, very supportive, and did make, I think, referrals that we found, again, very positive and very supportive.
Okay, wonderful. And Laura, same question for you. How did you and your family deal with taking care of yourselves?
Well, we did it very poorly.
Like most families.
I was going to say, we really missed on this area, and it's crazy because when we have our support groups, you know, I always tell people, you're really taking care of two people here. You've got to take care of yourself first so you can care for your loved one. But yet I'm a big liar because we didn't do it. So here's what we had, just like many other families. You know, we had our jobs and our kids and our grandkids, and we were caring for our mom, you know, in a long-distance way, 2 hours away. And so we just forged on. I think about midway through her journey, we realized the beauty of, you know, divide and conquer. So we finally figured it out, but we realized that if we scheduled family members and friends to visit, you know, in a divide and conquer kind of way, that she could experience that richness of having close people by her, but it, you know, of course, didn't need to always be us. We just need to pulse it. So she had a lot of engagement and then ultimately a lot of happiness and well-being, but we weren't in charge of all that. It took a community of family and friends to keep her plugged in and engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So true. Thank you. And thank you for being honest, too.
Yes,
Linda,
I'm sorry.
how about you and your family, Linda?
Well, I think I was very fortunate in the respect that I had been retired during this whole process. So I was able to go over to the Galena South Senior Center, and I was with my mother every day. And over there, everything about the center was positive and uplifting, no matter what situation or illness you had or diagnosis. So we did. I have to say, I really, and my husband, he's been just an angel through this, and would, I think, agree with everything I've said. We had fun with my mother. We were able to do things for her that were so good for her, just for her, dignity and respect. She started painting when she was 65. And so, for instance, we had a big showing of all her paintings and opened it to the community. Everything that we did with my mother, being that it was so positive and so much fun, helped us to take care of ourselves. We had that energy of knowing that we were all coping and doing the best we could for her, and that allowed ourselves time to exercise and just our daily experiences of being out in the community with Mom or being at the senior center provided us with the social. It provided us with being able to ask questions. It provided us with time that we could go and do some things for ourselves.
Okay, great. Thank you. Harry, I want to pull you in on this question because I want to see what you see from the other side, a person living with dementia. How do you see caregivers taking care of themselves, or don't you?
Well, first of all, you have to realize I live in a different world than you. I like the world I'm living in. It is easy for me, and I feel safe in it. And you're welcome into my world at any time, but don't try to drag me back into your world because I don't understand it, and I'm afraid of it. Now, as far as caregivers taking care of themselves, now I'm selfish. I demand my wife takes care of herself so she can take care of me. Now, I mean, that's selfish on my part, but it's not. I mean, she has to realize that she has to take care of herself. And that's something that caregivers don't believe in. I mean, they think they can do everything on their own, and I'm here to tell you, people like me, we're a handful. And sometimes you just have to sit back and you have to take care of yourself and let somebody else handle the problem.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I know that I myself and I'm sure all the others here and those that are listening. I mean, you feel guilty if you take off and do something for yourself because you worry. Will your loved one be cared for properly? Sometimes we think we're the only ones who can do it. Sometimes we don't think that, but we act that way, and then our siblings think that, and so then they back away. I know I ran into that with my brothers. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and then we get mad at one another for not being there, and we don't always open the door for help. And so very, very good point, Harry. Thank you for bringing that up. Mindy, I'm going to go to you now. I really want to talk about what activities you found to work well to engage those with dementia. And I'd really like to focus on the puzzle because I can't believe we're down to 15 minutes left already of the show. So we need to make sure that we get the pieces of the past in here. So can you give us a little background? Thank you.
Sure. Several years ago, we really were in search of an activity that would provide Dad with pleasure and a sense of satisfaction. And we discovered portrait puzzles. It's a small company in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and family photos can be uploaded to the portrait puzzle website, and they are magically transformed into high-quality puzzles. And the 30-piece puzzles are simply perfect for Dad because each puzzle piece is about 3.5 by 3.5 inches. They're easy for him to handle. He can work with the puzzles independently, or he can do them with others. It's a great way for him to be able to converse with other people and for other people to learn a little bit about Dad and Dad's life and our family. As I said earlier, he has a Model A, and he has several puzzles of his Model A. We've probably given him something like 12 over the last few years. But birthday celebrations, vacations, family photos, special holidays, and he loves his puzzles. And they've just been a godsend for him. And they've also really been helpful to Mom because if there are times when Dad's attention needs to be redirected, she can do that with these puzzles. And so they've been very useful tools for her. And quite honestly, it's been very heartwarming to know that there's an activity that Dad enjoys, that brings him pleasure, and that he can get a sense of satisfaction in completing. So that's it in a nutshell. We met with Jay McNamara, who you mentioned earlier, who's the owner of Portrait Puzzles, in May of 2014. We had already established pieces of the past in an attempt to spread the word about the power of puzzles, because we had learned that for those with dementia, they can provide relaxation, social stimulation, conversation, and really kind of a reminiscence therapy, if you will, that improves memory and brain function. So it's just been a great tool for us, and we really are very anxious and eager to spread the word to others so other families can derive the same pleasure that we have.
Great. Missy, anything you want to add there?
I would just say that the thing that has been fun, I think, both for mom and caregivers who have observed Dad working with these puzzles, is that he has really gotten better and better at it, and he can complete them more and more quickly. And he clearly has his favorites, and it's been great. I think again, to Mindy's point, it was important for us to find something that Dad would both enjoy and would feel some success with. And so I would invite folks to take a look at piecesofthepastpuzzles.com and see if it might be something that would help them. We really believe that we are, all on this journey together, and that if we can help other folks learn from our experiences, that's really what it's all about. And so again, spreading the word is important to us, and again, if we can be helpful, that would be a terrific reward.
Okay,
and quite
great.
frankly, Mom and Dad would want us to be doing just this.
Mhm. Yep, which is cool, sharing your knowledge. Laura, I want to ask for your opinion, since you work in a community setting. What are your thoughts with Pieces of the Past?
Oh my goodness, our memory care families love these puzzles. We see just increased, engagement, increased well-being, increased happiness. I think it's an activity that, of course, each resident enjoys, but to have it be customized to their life with their, car or their dog or their house, that just takes it to a new level, because the professional caregivers or family member or friend that, sits with them and, participates in this puzzle, they get to reminisce about that car or that dog or that house. And so it just, every time someone sits down to participate in this puzzle, it's all good. It not only increases their mood and their calmness and their well-being, but as so many people know with memory disorders, that well-being and that sense of happiness lasts many, many hours into the day.
Yeah, I wish I would have known about this with my mom when she was in her earlier stages. I did just put in the chat box this link, though it is on the website as well. But I see so many different uses for this. Dementia or not, just the sharing of history, which is something we don't do very well. And then, kind of making a game out of it, and then, helping it raise connection and have communication is just it's a brilliant, fun way to work. Linda, what are your thoughts about Pieces of the Past puzzles?
Oh, I think they're excellent. When I first met Mindy and Missy, and they told me about Pieces of the Past, I said, well, I really think what I'd like to do is have you come to one of our caregivers meetings. And since that time, everybody has been extremely enthusiastic about it, and that's something that we, each month as we meet, I always have the puzzle set out and the information, and we always talk about it no matter what the subject is. And it's just, I think, just a wonderful, wonderful social interaction that you can do with your loved ones.
Mhm. Great. Harry, I'm gonna pull you in as well in terms of what do you think about making pictures that you have into a puzzle? Does that sound something that would be of interest to you in terms of?
Absolutely, Lori. I love puzzles. I love the concept of maybe a group family portrait or something, maybe at a picnic or whatever. And as we're building the puzzle, we're telling the story of the picture. Like when we put the picture or the piece of the puzzle of an aunt, uncle, sister, brother, whatever, we tell a little story about that. That's what putting these puzzles together so much fun when you can interact like that. It's just not the fact of picking up a piece and making it fit. It's the interaction that goes along with it. Now, one of the questions I do have, I'm really interested in this, but a lot of times wonderful ideas are wonderful, but we can't afford them. What's the price? What's the price range of some of these puzzles?
Okay. And Mindy, I'm going to go ahead and throw that back to you.
Sure. The 30-piece puzzle that I had mentioned, it's 16 by 20 inches, and it's $34.99 plus $5 in shipping. But if you enter the Pieces of the Past promotion code, it's POP, you receive a $2 discount. And then Jay has been gracious enough to offer a donation to the Alzheimer's Association and Caregiver Action Network for $5 for every puzzle sold.
Great.
That's wonderful.
Any other comments, Harry?
No, I'm really excited about that because I always look for new ways of challenging people living with dementia, and I get so much pushback because people think they can't do that, and things like that. But puzzles are the perfect thing that you can let us tell the story. You know, we might need help putting the pieces together, but if you're smart enough, you can draw some kind of a story out of that puzzle, and that's the key. That's what makes it all so worthwhile.
I agree. I definitely agree. Thank you for your insight, Harry, and it's always so helpful for all of us. Missy, I'm going to throw something to you, and that is, what kind of challenges and opportunities do you think there are in terms of reaching out, to care partners?
I think, from my perspective, there are really a couple. Certainly the timing of when support may be available, as I alluded to earlier, that doesn't always work into a caregiver's schedule. So I think that's something that's always going to be a challenge and an opportunity. And I think that there is, still significant hesitation on some folks' part to admit that they need help. Most people, or many people, won't want to raise their hand and say, I could use some. And so I think as we continue to talk about the challenges and talk about the journeys, that people will engage in a way that is more supportive, and others can come together to provide the help that they need. I think people want to be helpful. I think it's how can we be helpful, and how can we encourage those that really need support and need help to feel okay about asking for it.
Good point. Mindy, how about you? Any challenges or opportunities in terms of reaching care partners that you see?
I'm not sure I have anything to add to what Missy has just said.
Okay.
I really don't.
Okay, that's fine. And Linda, how about you?
Well, I think one thing is if someone does say to you, gee, I'm available for you, let me know if I can help, I think what you have to do is give specifics. If someone does reach out to you and you take their help, tell them that on Monday at 8 a.m. I need to go to a doctor's appointment, but I need someone to stay with mom or dad during that time. So I think when people do reach out to you, give specifics so that they can say, yes, I'd be happy to come over, or yes, I'd be happy to drive, so that they also feel like they're helping.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. How about Laura? How about you? What do you think in terms of challenges and opportunities for reaching out to caregivers. Any suggestions there?
Oh, yes, this is a topic near and dear to me. I say, there's a courtesy answer when someone asks the primary caregiver, how are things going? How's Walter doing? There's the courtesy answer in which you reply, fine. And I think it depends on who's asking. If they are a close family member or a friend, I always encourage our primary caregiver to just think about that question before you answer it. I think they don't know how to answer it, so they just say fine and move on to the next topic. What I encourage them to do is say, oh, we're fine, thank you. Although Walter's having difficulty with his sleep cycle, he is, sleeping during the day and up all night, and therefore I'm up all night. So anything that you can do to help in that regard, maybe, and then like Linda says, really get into specifics. Would you be willing to come over to the house for a couple hours during the afternoon so I can take a nap? Because, of course, she's been up with him, all night. So I think I encourage people to think about, A, who's asking the question. If it's an acquaintance, to give a courtesy answer is fine. But if it's a adult child or a very close neighbor or a friend who's trusted and in your circle and knows really what's going on, just say, gosh, we had a rough week this week, and I need some help with groceries, or I need some help with this or that. So I think there are so many folks close to you that want to help, they just don't know what to do. So I talk to the primary caregivers about really taking a leadership role there and expressing clearly what they do need help with, because that friend or family member does want to help. They do.
Yep, I agree. And it's such a twist in terms of people's comfort levels, and that dance of, I know I'm supposed to ask, but I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do from there, and we're just not good at receiving help at all. And so it's so easy for us just to turn it down. So, well, listen, ladies, I thank you all so much for being with us and sharing your stories and letting us know about piecesofthepastpuzzles.com. I just think it's a fantastic opportunity for everyone to be able to utilize these, get your home pictures made into puzzles. What a fascinating thing for people with dementia, for children, for adults of all ages. I could see this being a really kind of a cool gift to be able to give people in remembrance of just an absolutely fun time in their life and helping them engage. So thank you so much. If people are interested, they can also email Melinda, and her last name is DALGARN @AOL.com. And again, you can go to www.piecesofthepastpuzzles.com, or you can go to portraitpuzzles.com as well. Thank you so much for being with us, ladies. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. You guys have a wonderful day. Excited to be able to roll into our next guest here in just a minute. I'm just going to give you some brief highlights before I introduce her. If you haven't listened to our last show, that might also be of interest to you. Patrick Talley was with us in Making a Difference with Technology, and he has some cool things you can do with pictures as well in terms of making short little videos, and it's really, and his applications are free. So check him out. He's got 3 different apps. One hasn't been launched. One is going to be more of a GPS, but it's much smaller than what we've seen out in the market right now. And then our next show, next Tuesday, we're going to have Lori Shearer on with Dementia Days, and she is living with dementia. She's going to give us some great insights. We did our Dementia Chats on the 14th, and with that one, on Dementia Chats, we have our panel of experts. Harry Urban, who is with us today, is one of them. And We discussed about the moving target of a person with dementia, with their abilities and disabilities, and how it fluctuates, and how that can affect not only the person who's diagnosed, but those that care for them. And then we discussed the launch of the new Dementia-Friendly America and what that means for us today and tomorrow, and what people would like to see happen with this. So that is also recorded. Everything you can access by AlzheimersSpeaks.com. On our blog, we had a great article that got a lot of comments regarding dementia, the benefits of meditation and spiritual fitness. There was also the Dementia Action Alliance webinar, Living Fully with Dementia. That currently, I have not seen the recording of that yet, but as soon as I get that, I will let you know. Wonderful article on Mara Botanis, an amazing lady leading the charge against dementia. Mara just received the National Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Award. And then last night, I just reblogged something from Truthful Loving Kindness. She talks about the time and energy consumption that it takes when you have dementia symptoms just to, be able to engage. And then last, I just want to say, if you're going to be in Ina, Illinois on August 6th, come and see me at Rend College. I would love the opportunity to meet you in person. So let's roll into our second half of our show here. We're going to be talking about clinical trials, and we're lucky enough to have Dr. Neelum I'm going to probably pronounce your name wrong, so please correct me, Aggarwal, and she works with the population of health neurologists and clinical researchers in the field of longevity and aging. She is also the co-leader of the Rush Alzheimer's Disease Clinical Core in Chicago and an associate professor in the Department of Neurological Sciences at Rush University Medical Center. She's authored more than 40 manuscripts and presented at national and international conferences on topics of aging and dementia. She's a frequent blogger for the Alzheimer's Disease Cooperative Study Group, and comments on her findings on aging research in the area of both women's brain, racial and ethnic and minorities, and special populations. So thank you so much for being with us today. How are you doing today, Doctor?
I'm doing fine, and thank you for inviting me.
And I'm going to ask you how you pronounce your name, because I know I just cremated it, and I apologize for that.
The last name is Aggarwal. So it's Neelum Aggarwal. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Really excited to talk with you about clinical trials and, what are they and why are they important? We hear a lot about them, but I know that there's also a lot of hesitation for people with these. And so can you give us a little background on what they are and why they're important for us?
Okay. Well, first of all, clinical trials, if you want to think about it very in a general way, is a trial or a study that wants to test something. So we're trying to test a possible intervention, whether it be a medicine, it could be a therapy. It could be, doing a survey on someone to see if that would help diagnose, prevent, maybe even treat or cure a disease. So it's just really a formal way of looking at, we have an issue, we have a disease, what can we do to see if this can make it better? And there are different types of trials. Some have medicine, some have more non-medicine, but they're therapies nevertheless. Now, why are they important? Well, they're important because if we don't engage people to come into trials, we just don't know, frankly, what works for a specific disease. And we then rely on a person's experience in treating the disease just by experience, but not in a focused, in a structured way to collect information that could be, then generalized to a larger group. And I think that's the first thing that's really important. The other thing is that frankly, medicines, especially for Alzheimer's disease. We have 4 medicines that have been on the market for many years. We have not had a new medicine for many, many years in Alzheimer's. And those medicines got on the market because clinical trials were done with people who said, this is what's happening, these medicines, what is this medicine? Let's try this medicine. And is it worth it? Is it changing something? So everything that you see, all your medicines, even the over-the-counter medications that are out there, went through, for the most part, like aspirin is a great example, they went through initially some trials. Does it make a difference? And then it depends on how, I guess, how much of a side effect it can occur, whether or not it comes over the counter or a prescription. So that's why they're really important.
Okay. Now, in terms of Alzheimer's disease, I guess I see them as being just critical given the numbers of people and the kind of lack of knowledge we know. Why do you feel that clinical trials regarding Alzheimer's disease and dementia is important?
Well, it's important because, you just mentioned one important thing. So many people are really having this disease. It's really coming down to where it's going to be hard to find someone who's not touched by the disease, either by a friend or know someone or who caring for someone or someone who has the disease. And that's a really staggering kind of statistic that's out there with the numbers of people who will be affected. And trials allow for new medicines and new therapies to be looked at and investigated to see if we can, number one, slow down the disease from progressing if someone has it, but more importantly, can we start doing trials to prevent the disease? And I think that's one of the things that has really changed over the last few years in the Alzheimer research world, where we are now shifting our focus on prevention. And we've never really tried to talk too much about prevention in trials, and this is where we're really encouraging people to look at trials again, think about trials. One thing I say to my patients, and I say it to physicians and patients, whenever I see someone in my office with Alzheimer's disease, and I talk about medicines and I talk about treatments, I also talk about trials. Trials have to be part of the clinical treatment program, if you will. They cannot be left out out there. Well, okay, maybe we'll do a trial. It should be talked about in the terms of how we're going to treat someone with the disease.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, absolutely agree with that. Can you tell us some of the specific benefits that you see in terms of clinical trials?
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that question up because there are benefits for trials that sometimes people don't realize until they get in a trial, and then they start talking about what they expected and also what they got out of the trial. So one of the things that happens is, one of the good benefits is that people get engaged into doing something. And I think that's so critically important, especially with this disease. People feel at times like, I'm not doing anything. It's just happening to me. It's happening to my loved one. It's happening. We're not doing anything. And that creates anxiety. And that creates frustration, anxiety, and frankly, depression. So trials allow people to get engaged and to do something. Also, the caregivers have said, I never thought that I would get so much out of this trial, even though my loved one was in the trial. And what they mean by that comment has been, I got more information, I've learned about this disease, I've been much more educated. I see the doctor and the team whenever I come in for the various visits. I'm able to ask questions. I'm able to get more personalized care, and I get tests done that maybe I would not have been able to get tests done, and that has a level of not only comfort but for education. And I think that's really important, and people, they continually tell me that, wow, I didn't realize this is what I would get out of participating in this trial.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, some of the benefits that you listed there are
it's
really,
huge.
really important. Yeah. Now, another thing that, we're hearing so much about in terms of, early detection, and there's been articles that, some doctors know, but they're not even telling their people. Why do you think it's important that there is early detection?
Well, I think when you think about early detection, if you look at the research, and the research that I'm involved with is that we know that changes already occur in the brain up to about 20 years before any clinical symptom occurs. So what does that mean? It means that the brain is already undergoing changes before the symptom of forgetfulness, especially like in Alzheimer's, the short-term forgetfulness starts to appear. Okay, the brain changes are occurring, let's say, before maybe the mood changes are starting to occur, people becoming more quiet or having more difficulty with language or spatial types of tasks. And that's important. That's an important comment. That's an important research finding, because it's now pushing us to say, okay, we need to start talking about what can we do to, number one, slow this down if it's going to occur, but number two, get medicines on board, if you will, at that stage so that we can prevent it. And I think the biggest thing, that has totally pushed this changes occurring up to 20 years earlier has to do in two areas. Imaging of the brain has taken off, and we are now imaging the brain and seeing not only what the brain looks like, through an MRI, which many people are familiar with, but we are now looking at what the brain does. How is the brain functioning? And that's coming through special scans called PET scans, which can look at blood flow and can look at where the amyloid, the proteins in the brain that are causing some trouble, are really located. And that is the biggest driver, neuroimaging. And then we also know people who've had brain autopsies done, and that's something we do at Rush, and we do many of them. We know that people who've had no signs of Alzheimer's disease can have plaques and tangles in the brain. And we're like, whoa, those are there and there's no sign. So that means there's things happening in the brain that can already tell us we maybe need to take care and try to prevent the disease. And that is why we're really pushing early detection, because now we have the tools to detect it earlier, and we need more research to, basically hone in on what we need to do.
Okay. Can you tell us, what are some of the things that you're doing at the research center in the Alzheimer's clinical trial area?
Sure. So, here in Chicago at the Alzheimer's Center, we have a very, I would say probably a very wide array of clinical trials that we do. And we've done that on purpose. We've been very intentional with this, that we want to make sure we do trials that can really go through the spectrum of what is happening with thinking and aging in the aging brain. So, for example, we will have prevention studies coming through the center where we can recruit people who do not have a diagnosis of dementia, but perhaps have a family member who has dementia, or who knows of someone who has dementia and they're very concerned, okay? And we would have trials to see if they can qualify and come in a prevention study. Then we have trials that have to do with the diagnosis of dementia. So a doctor has diagnosed dementia, feels it's Alzheimer's, and then the question of the now what. So now what are we going to do? We're on medication, now what? And that's where I get involved. And I say, here are some trials for mild Alzheimer's. Here are some trials for moderate Alzheimer's. And then here are some trials for persons who have severe Alzheimer's. So we really try to go across the full spectrum of the disease, okay? And it's something that we've been very intentional in doing, because to raise awareness not only to the doctors in the community that there are things out there, but to the public that there are different opportunities for research participation. And also, I have to add, when you have this kind of a program, you're able to reach a large group of people. So I work, exclusively at times with the minority communities, and often they're coming in quite late in the disease state. And then the question is, doctor, what do you have for a trial in this stage? And we're very into making sure we have something for all groups of people coming in various stages of the disease.
Okay. Now, one thing that I have to ask is, I asked the question, about, what are you doing in terms of research for Alzheimer's? Is it just Alzheimer's, or do you do Lewy body or FTD or any of the others?
Right, and we do those studies. We have seen them come through, but we have really focused on Alzheimer's here at our center. We have centers in Chicago at Northwestern that is very, very good in doing frontotemporal dementias and primary progressive aphasia, those kinds of trials. And then, with regards to Lewy body, what's interesting is that our movement disorder colleagues, my neurology colleagues in movement disorders, they have also taken an interest in starting to do trials that engage, Lewy body dementia and also Parkinson's disease. And we're seeing that also. We have a website, www.DontForgetAlzheimers.com or AlzheimersChicago.com that people can go on and look for various studies that are going on. But again, they're out there. That's the message. Mm-hmm. They're out there.
Okay, wonderful. Now, one of the questions that people get all the time, there's kind of this big conversation, and I know it was just in the media the other day again, is does Alzheimer's affect women differently than men?
Oh, yeah. And it does, and I'm really glad that finally the press is coming around to this. This has been a discussion that has been ongoing for a long time in the research and in the clinical world. As doctors, number one, we know that we see more women than men in general that are coming in with memory issues. We also see more women and daughter-in-laws and daughters coming into the clinics bringing their loved one in, okay? So, number one, we see the women being affected, but number two, we see the women as the caregivers coming in. And right now, I think one of the for the listeners to realize the lifetime risk of developing Alzheimer's disease is 1 in 5 compared to 1 in 10 for men, okay? And that is really important because what it's saying is that women over their lifetime really have twice the risk of developing Alzheimer's compared to men. And the argument always was, well, women just live longer. Of course they're going to get this disease. It's all due to age. Age is a factor, but it is not
live twice as long.
That's exactly. Well, this is the whole thing. Thank you. And the other thing is, age is a factor, but it is not the only thing. We're really trying to understand what are the reasons, and of course, hormones come into the play here, right? Hormones, estrogen. And, the estrogen that we lose when we go into the menopausal stage, and what's the effect on that, on memory and thinking. We're also looking at stress and heart issues. This is two areas that really need to be looked at more deeply, especially heart issues with women. Women have very high rates of heart disease. And, again, is this the reason why somehow we are developing also dementia more than men? And stress, is it bringing it on? So I think these are the biggest issues right now. We need to really engage people in and stay on this topic and really try to figure out why it's occurring different in women compared to men.
Yep. Oh, that's great. And I think that the statistic of 1 in 5 and 1 in 10, I mean, and that's just huge. I mean, if that's not a slap in the face. So it's important. What can women do or try to help to prevent the disease? Is there anything out there that we can do differently?
Well, and my answer is yes. And I think first of all, understanding what the risks are. Okay, is the first thing. All right, that's the first thing. And I'm very big on what can I do, what can we modify. So, for example, age. Frankly, you can't really sit there and say, this is the age I'm going to live at, and after that I'm going to die. I mean, honestly, age is something that's really a non-negotiable. The other thing is family history. I think you need to know your family history. You need to know what are the big issues in your family history. So if heart disease runs in your family history, then we need to pay more attention to the heart health. And when I say heart disease, I am talking also about the diabetes, the cholesterol, and the high blood pressure, not just specifically heart attacks and heart failure and those things. We have to learn what is in our history and what can we control, and those are things that to an extent you really can control. You also need to reduce stress. I say this every day to everybody who will listen to me. Get your stress under control. And people say, well, that's easier said than done. And the answer is yes, but you need to do it. Stress is hurting you. It is hurting your health. It is not just a mental thing. It is hurting your health. We know people under stress have high, in the blood, CRP, these inflammatory markers. We know that these are high. We know that cortisol is being released too much and not going down in the levels it should be, and it's impacting memory. We know that the gut basically doesn't function as well under stress. So stress has to be controlled. I mean, before we came on, I heard you talk about meditation and trying to really reduce, for thinking wise, but also it can reduce stress. We need to exercise. This is all common sense stuff. But here's the thing about exercise. There have been studies that have come out that exercise has much more an impact on women than it does on men. It's good for both, but somehow for women, exercise seems to be much better, okay? And we know that when women exercise, which means aerobic exercise, their brains look different. And their brains aren't becoming smaller, if you will, over time. And guess what else comes under exercise? Walking. Walking counts. And I think for the longest time, walking has got a bad rap. Walking has never been in there, well, walk. No, you need to walk. And walk as much as you can and as fast, slow, but just walk. Very, very good things for brain health. And then nutrition. The last thing we always talk about is diet. And this is a simple thing. I just said it last week in a conference, and here it is. I need people to be looking at what they're eating. I need them to be thinking about getting color on the plate, which means your plate has to have reds and yellows and greens on it. That's color. And you need to really choose a heart-healthy diet because that's a brain-healthy diet. Heart-healthy diet equals brain-healthy diet, and then add nuts and berries, and you're off. That is what you should be eating with every meal. Yep. And that's it.
I was just going to say too, and the colors are not artificial colors. You're talking real food, real food,
guys. Real food. Yep.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about earlier, it was when we were talking with Pieces of the Past, and the gals there, in terms of reducing stress, was she was talking about just learning to, live better, kind of be in their world. And, and I'm a firm believer, and this might sound really strange, that the disease is here to teach us to live differently, to engage, to be less stressful, to let go of control, to learn how to play again. And, they really talked about living in a person with dementia's world. And when we do that, everything changes. I mean, it's just everything becomes much easier. We add such stress to ourselves that we don't really need to do, and it's sad. And I was one of them. My mom had the disease for 30 years, so I mean, I get it. And she started in her mid 50s and lived till 86. But we had a brilliant life together, and I wouldn't have given that up. But I think it was either Linda or Lori who talked about living more courageous and more creative, and it was really kind of almost an improv state that reduced that stress level, and they just had a lot more fun,
exactly.
in terms of engaging. I think we, as women especially, we're almost taught from very young ages to be that care provider, that caregiver on multiple levels, and it is a stressful role, when you're trying to live everybody's life, and kind of keep it on par there. So great information there. Now, if diagnosed, what regime would you recommend for women? Is it I know you talked about the meditation and the exercise and eating right, and but are there certain medications that are out there, or
Well, that's a great question, and that's the question I get all the time. And I'm going to tell you, it's been very frustrating that we are not reporting any of the data based on sex and gender. And this is one of my, big areas that I keep championing, that all clinical trial data should be reported with sex and gender differences, so we can answer those questions that are coming from patients and families. And yes, we by law we have to include women and minorities, and it was very good. It came into the clinical trial world, and we have to do that. But when you look at actual studies, if you really look at them, it is not reported differences between men and women. Basically, the comment most of the time says no differences were noted, but actually looking at groupings, men compared to women, it's not there. And there is a big push right now in the clinical medical and the research world to really start promoting sex and gender types of analyses, but more importantly, sex and gender type of medicine. So, for example, medical students coming through that I see and on the various committees that I sit on, I am talking about sex and gender differences as it relates to many, many clinical conditions. Do you know what they are? Do you know how they affect what medications we should use? Do we even know if there are differences in meds? So at this time, I can tell you the Alzheimer medicines that are out there, there is no compelling any evidence to suggest one medicine works better in women compared to men. It's strictly based on the doctor and the doctor's experience in giving the medication, okay? And that's an important point right now. Moving forward, it would be great to know what medicines may work better with women compared to men when it comes down to memory issues and diagnosing Alzheimer's disease. The other thing that when you talk about what women can do differently than men, especially being, let's say, being diagnosed, I always tell my women patients, they need to tell and talk to family about what they need and what they don't need. And they have to be very vocal about it. This doesn't help me. This helps me. This situation I don't like. And say it. And because, when you're a caregiver, yes, you have been with the person. You're either a spouse or you've been the daughter, the son. But, you really may not know what the patient needs. And I tell especially my women, be vocal, stay vocal, and express yourself. Women tend to express themselves more than men. We know that. And therefore, if that's the case, they need to continue to express themselves even if they've been diagnosed. Okay? The other thing I tell women, and this ties into the caregiving issue. As you said, women tend to be caregivers, frankly, some whether they want to or not. They're put in that role. At times they're expected to do certain things. They have to figure out what they can do and then learn to delegate. And that's the toughest thing for women. Women have a hard time delegating things out and saying, I don't do that, or I can't do that, or why don't you do this, etc. And I think if we learn to delegate more often, the stress would go down in a lot of things. Because as you said, you give up control then. And but giving up control means to decreasing stress, okay? And I guess my final point would be the multitasking thing. I just gave a talk on, a 1-hour talk on multitasking and what it does to the brain. We tend to wear this multitasking badge of honor that we can multitask. And I think, women in general, we do. We do multitask. We have to in many cases. But there comes a point when it's detrimental. It is not helping anything. If anything, there's too many open projects. There's too many open things in the air, and that's causing the confusion. The brain likes structure. The brain really does like structure. The brain functions well in structure. And when you multitask, the brain is, basically not functioning at its best. So I tell, again, my women, patients, their daughters, caregivers, this multitasking, you have to slow it down, 3 things at one time, if that, and you have got to really do things in a pace that you can handle, and then you will do it well. You will do it well.
Yep. Yeah, that is fascinating that they're not tracking gender, and sex. Yeah. I mean, you just kind of, as an outsider looking in, I would think that would be like 101, especially in this day and age, the way data can be collected and input. So good for you for really, staying on top of that and shouting from the mountaintops. Appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Are there any questions that doctors should be asking women versus men that you think would help, or that women should bring up to their doctors if they're not being asked to help flag their condition? Because I know, like you mentioned with the hormones, I mean, for 10 years my mom was told, it's just menopause.
Right.
And then 10 years later, then they did significant tests, and it was like, oh, oops, she's got the mentality of a 3-year-old. Don't let her out of your sight. And that whole 10 years, my mom knew it was more than that. She kept. She was afraid she was going to lose her job. She kept a manual. I mean, she knew at her core, which was so strange because nobody talked really about Alzheimer's back then, 30 years ago. I mean, you just didn't hear that word. But she was just so sure that's what it was.
Well, I can tell you, and I have heard that comment so many times, where, I say, the women are going through the healthcare system and they're going between the primary and the OB and the OB and the primary, and then maybe they'll go to cardiology and then they'll flip back to the OB, and then maybe they'll come to neurology. And, that time window is about 16 months, okay? I've tracked it with my patients that have come, and it is so true that women in general most likely will talk more to the OB, gynae, and probably internal medicine doctors. And so what I've done, and I've really reached out to my OB colleagues and basically have said, whenever a woman is complaining about memory and you think it is not due to any kind of hormone shots or any changes in the regimen of what you're doing, send over. And that has been the comment. Send over and we will do an assessment and see what we're dealing with. And I can tell you, more times than not, I have called the OB back and said, this is early Alzheimer's. And the OB has been stunned. They have been stunned. And of course, they've said, fine.
They look
now we know.
Okay.
Right, they look okay. Or they just say, this is such a common complaint. And so what I've done is raising awareness with the OBs. The other area that I've raised awareness where women talk much more to their doctors tends to be in cardiology. We at Rush, at the Alzheimer's Center, I have a cardio-cognitive clinic that I started with the medical director of the Rush Heart Center for Women. Tuesday afternoons, I'm doing cognitive screenings on her patients that she sees in the clinic because many of them have complained about memory issues, and it's not clear whether it's a heart issue, heart medication, or is this the beginning of an early dementia. And again, I believe that what we have to do is with women have to talk to their doctors, and a lot of times if the doctor does not feel that there's anything to worry about, they can ask for another evaluation, and most likely it will go to neurology, okay? And I think they need to push it. I think they need to push the envelope on this because I've seen far too many cases where it was that 16-month window by the time they came to see me. And if you look back in the history, it was there. And, it's those kinds of things where the woman was told, well, it's all in your head, or you're depressed, or you're overstressed, or all these things, which it could be, but you need to get an evaluation done.
Yeah. The other one I think that would be critical to talk to, because I think a lot of women see these who are just the nurse practitioners. I think that there just seem to be, I know if I can go see my nurse practitioner versus the doctor, that's where I'm at, because she just takes more time with me. I feel much more connected to her as well, and so it's interesting that you even know who people are talking to and who they're more likely to open up to, and I think that's huge in and of itself, because I hadn't ever heard anyone talking about that. It makes such sense, in the process there. How about with regards to the caregiving role for an Alzheimer's patient? Does that impact women differently than men? And I know you had mentioned that there's, more women caregivers, than men. or that will admit it anyways. That might be part of the problem too out there.
Right. Well, it's interesting again, in my experience with caregiving, I see men having more problems with caregiving when the wife has the disease. I see men come and talk to me that I don't know what to do. And therefore, I don't know what to do. I'm going to hand it over to my daughter to do this because I just don't know what to do. I've had men tell me, I have to fix this. I have to take, that kind of take charge thing. And I've told them, if you're going to get into a fight with an Alzheimer patient, you're always going to lose. So, you're not going to win. So you better think about your strategy, if you will, because it's not going to work. Having said that, I think that women, it's interesting, when I speak to a woman who's a caregiver, what I've noticed is the women tend to ask about overall big picture, how are we going to manage this? Is this person comfortable? How often should the visits be? What should we be doing? How can I help? How does she feel? How does he feel? This kind of discussion, okay? When I speak to the men caregivers, the men are for the most part, very bottom line. Okay, what medicine are we going to start? When can we start it? If this medicine doesn't work, what can we do? How long is this going to go? What stage is the person in? And can the person live at home, the loved one, whoever it is? So they're very, very into, at least my patients are very into, give me the facts, what are we going to do? And how do we do it? And I think, I tell people when you go to the doctor, and if this is something, like, especially if you're a caregiver and you're thinking this is something happening, you have to go with questions and direct it of what you want to get out of the visit. This is very important. I hear many people saying, well, I went to the doctor and he didn't say anything. Well, he did say something. It wasn't exactly what you wanted to maybe have a discussion about. And I think with this disease, people get very intimidated about where do we even start. And that, I think in the beginning you asked me a question, or we were talking about why is it not being diagnosed? Because, my experience with my colleagues, my doctor colleagues from all specialties are saying to me, we don't even know where to start. Where do you start with this? Because once you say the D word, dementia, and then you go to the A word, Alzheimer's, everything opens up then. I mean, the questions about living and stages and medicines and trials and the average physician just doesn't have that time allotted in the schedule to do this. So a lot of time they are so overwhelmed. So that's why I ask patients, put a list together and let's go through that list and get the information at this point that you need right now. And you can say, well, I don't know what I need. Start looking, start reading, start educating yourself, and then get that question and then elaborate off of it. And I think that would relieve a lot of stress from people. I really do.
Yep, I totally agree with you on that. Yeah, definitely. What kind of suggestions do you have for women caregivers and Alzheimer's patients?
I think one thing that women have to do, and I have been talking already to the medical students that I mentor as medical students, saying you as medical students need to understand this disease because you may not be seeing, depending on your specialty, what you go into, but this may happen at the house, with your own family, and showing people how to manage the medical with the caregiving is really important because you have to manage both. You cannot just be a caregiver without understanding the medical behind of what's happening. So I think when it comes to caregiving, and especially for women have to learn to be more in a team and play as a team. And what does that mean? It means that they have to start thinking in terms of, this is what's happening. This is my loved one who has this. I need to assemble people around me who can help me with a service, whether it is providing supervision, whether it's, I think, again, I heard before I came on today, doing grocery shopping. They have to learn to have team members, if you will, there to help them. And for the most part, women don't. They want to do the whole thing on their own. They may turn to a daughter, but the daughter has to go to work. She can't do this by herself. Then the kids may come in and try to assemble a team, but the mother is feeling embarrassed that she can't handle this on her own. So what I'm saying is that the team mentality has to come into play here, where who's on your team. And if you don't have the family on your team, which I see a lot of, frankly, I see a lot of family not being on the team, and I'm okay with it. And I tell people, be okay with it. It's okay. You need to then look for new team players. And you need to get new people on your team. And where does that come from? Social services, sometimes support groups, okay? Other resources. Talk to the doctor. What other resources are out there? What do you know? Who can you point me to? Find a team. And I think that will help women tremendously. And delegate out that task. And that I think is going to help the most. I think for the most part, men intuitively do this. They intuitively do this. And they get people on that they think they need, that help them. And I'm not saying that they aren't caregiving, but they're caregiving in a different way. And frankly, I think we need to learn for how they caregive. Some people will say they don't caregive. That's not necessarily true. They do in a certain way, but they're very big on who do we need? What do we need to get done? And I think women need to think that way. I do.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I think that's very, very important for us to expand. We just don't do a good job in terms of connecting. You know, we think we're the only ones, or the only ones that we trust. To be able
but
to
but one thing though, I have to say this to the listening audience. Remember, women make up the majority, in many cases, of the workforce. And so what happens when this disease, this is something, again, I start very young when I talk about this. I'm talking to high school students about this already, about caregiving. If we do not figure out how to manage caregiving and careers, if you will, we are leaving in record numbers from the workforce. And that crosses everybody. That crosses people, in the labor force. That crosses our secretaries. That crosses the doctors. It crosses lawyers. It crosses everybody. You hear it all the time, that people are pulling back, and especially women. And so if we really have to focus on strategies to keep us in the workforce, and, again, one of the areas I champion with the women, young physicians and residents, what do I need to do to keep you in the workforce? How can we help you to keep you in the workforce? Because what's happening is people are pulling out. And that's not just pulling out and for caregiving. That is an equity issue. That is a financial issue. That is affecting many, many, many different things. And I think it has to do with taking on too much, not being able to sit there and say, oh my gosh, I'm going off the rails, I need to do something, I'm going to pull back. And I think that's the bigger discussion that has to happen as we talk also about caregiving. So my question always is to my women caregivers, especially the young ones, what do I need to do to keep you working? How can we help? And they are very receptive to that, because working is also therapy for them in many cases. It really is.
Yep. Well, that makes a lot of sense. What do you have any last thoughts? I can't believe we've got about 10 minutes left on the show, and I just want to give you enough time to be able to wrap up. And I also want to pull in Harry Urban, who actually is on the show with us, and Harry has dementia, to get his thoughts about some of the comments that you've made as well. So. But any last comments that you have, or?
Well, yeah, one comment I do want to bring up, as we talked about sex and gender differences, I think we really need to start talking much more about, racial and ethnic diversity of this disease. And I say that not just as a neurologist who sees people in clinics, but I'm in the field. I do home visits for our studies. I'm in really Chicago's racially diverse neighborhoods. This disease impacts different cultures in some ways very differently, okay? There's a lot of stigma in some cultures about recognizing what's happening, keeping the disease quiet, keeping it in the home, people not knowing where to get help for this disease. There's a lot of suffering going on in the houses where people just don't know where to turn, okay? And I also think, not only raising awareness in a culturally sensitive way, but also, getting people engaged into getting treatment and coming into trials. Right now, we have less than 5% in our clinical trials are minority, okay? Which means, what it means is that whatever we end up finding out for medicines and drugs is going to be mostly tested with populations that were Caucasian. So the question then that comes, does this medicine work the same in different ethnic groups? And sometimes it may or may not. We know in heart medicines they work differently, okay? We don't have those. We will not have those answers for Alzheimer's. And given the population in this country and the diversity in this country, we have really got to figure out how can we engage our minority populations to understand this disease, seek treatment, and participate in trials. And that is very, very important for everyone because it is a disease that crosses all nationalities, all socioeconomic groups, and we have got to really figure out how everyone can pull together and get engaged. And I guess that's my last comment for the listeners on this, is that the minority, the ethnic diversity in this disease, it's there. We just have to get more people engaged.
I agree, and in the movements, it's gathering steam. Long ways to go, but man, we've come a long, long ways in the last 5 years. Just,
exactly.
Unbelievable. I'm going to pull Harry Urban in and just see if he has any questions. Harry is a man living with dementia and has been for about 11 years out in Pennsylvania. And Harry, any questions or thoughts you have?
This has been a very enlightening show for me. Now, I say that because I speak out about dementia awareness. That's my passion in life. That's what I do. But I never gave a thought to the genders of dementia. I did raise the question. In fact, it's only been in the past week or two, I raised the question that it finally struck me that as many times as I speak, as many support groups I go to, I see very little minorities in the group, and I'm shocked by that. I didn't think about it before, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm shocked by it, and I'm saying why. Because I know they suffer just as much as we do. And I think we have to do a better job of now raising awareness amongst the different ethnic groups, minority groups, and genders. We're just not doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up as your observation, Harry, because that's there. I mean, I can tell you when I've spoken to my patients, or when I'm in the field, I physically go in houses and I say, so talk to me. Would you go to a support group? Oh, no, we don't do that. Or we won't go there. And it's that feeling at times of shame. This is occurring. We don't know how to handle this, or we have to keep this in the family. And I keep saying, yes, I understand the family is important for support, but you have to bring in other people. So I think, we're moving forward. I can tell you the numbers that you read about minorities and Alzheimer's disease, just do me the favor. When you read a number and when you hear the number, just know it's an underestimation. It is underreported. It is an underestimation. Because out in the field, I can tell you people have this disease living out there, and they are not going in, they are not getting diagnosed, and they are not coming to these groups as we would like to see them come. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, Harry?
No, that's I think I just added more to my passions now. We have so much work yet to do.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, Keep trooping, Harry. Keep going out there for me. Keep going out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we'll bring this up, too, maybe on Dementia Chats on what you thought of this conversation when we do that next week, Harry. And maybe we can get the other ones on board, too. That would be wonderful. So thank you so much, Harry, for participating in the show. Your insights are always very interesting. And Dr. Neelum Aggarwal, I'm going to say it wrong again. I don't know why.
You can just say Dr. A. Yeah, you can say Dr. A. That's what everybody says.
Dr. A. It's just like this is not that tough of a name. But I think when I'm wanting to say it right, then I screw it up.
Yeah.
when I make a point of it. Anyways, I appreciate you being on the show. This is a fascinating conversation and wonderful information for people to have. And again, people can go to DontForgetAlzheimers.com, just as it sounds, no apostrophe though, www.DontForgetAlzheimers.com, or you can go to AlzheimersChicago.com to be able to get more information on Alzheimer's clinical trials. It's a very easy webpage to maneuver. There's a survey that you can take to find out if you qualify or not, very simply. And so, again, thank you both so much for being with us today and all you're doing to change the face of Alzheimer's disease. You have a great week, and I would love to have you back on the show another time. We're really just full of such wonderful information. Really appreciate it.
Oh, well, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. To wrap up the show, I just want to, again, give a shout-out to Pieces of the Past Puzzles, who was our first guest, or you can go to Portrait Puzzles as well. And, again, check out that clinical trial at DontForgetAlzheimers.com. We're never going to find a cure if we don't have people step up to the plate on this, and it's just such an important piece. You really have the chance to help families battle this disease by participating in reshaping Alzheimer's treatments, and you can do this at a no-cost participation. And so again, check out DontForgetAlzheimers.com. Next show is going to be next week. We're going to have Lori Shearer with us with Dementia Days, who is living with dementia. She's going to have some great insights. I have just heard raves about her, and I actually can't wait to have her on the show and talk. And if you haven't read the article by Truthful Living Kindness on the blog, she talks about time and energy that is consumed when you have dementia symptoms, how overwhelming things can be. And last, I just want to give a shout out to, again, join us on the Purple Angel Project. You can find that on our About page on AlzheimersSpeaks.com, or check out Health Star Home Health. If you're going to be in Minnesota the end of August, beginning of September, make sure you check them out at the State Fair. Some really exciting things are going to be launched at that time. So we will see you next week. In the meantime, just have a blessed time. Talk to you soon. Bye now.
Hi, I'm Lori LeBay, and I wanted to tell you about Alzheimer's Speaks, which is another great podcast. You see, my own mother lived with dementia for 30 years, and I felt lost. Did you know every 3 seconds someone in the world is being diagnosed with dementia? Odds are it's going to hit your families too. We want to help you connect to services, products, tools, research, and stories so you can be prepared. Please subscribe to Alzheimer's Speaks on your favorite podcast platform.